In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is episode 138, and we are doing a follow-up to the Explore God series. It's a series we've done 7 weeks, asking life's deep, important questions. We brought on guests to cover these different topics, and hope that series was wonderful for you. I hope to just make it a big, long post with all of the videos for people to watch, and we'll make a nice page on our website. Maybe get that over at Apologetics 315 as well, which is a great resource website for those interested in apologetics. And look, I'm wearing the shirt today. The lettering's a little lower. I gotta get that fixed. At any rate, Apologetics 315. If you want a shirt like this, one with a little bit higher lettering, become one of the monthly donors over at apologetics315.com. All right, on today's show, we're kind of shooting the breeze here, but we're following up. We're talking about some questions that Christians may wrestle with, and this is going to be an interesting show because I have no idea what these questions or sayings are. Seth Baker, who's one of our associates with the program here, has prepared 5 questions and 5 common sayings, and so he's joined on our Skype line here, or not Skype, FaceTime. And also in studio, we have Ted Wright joining us yet again. Ted, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Hopefully this becomes a regular thing. It's great having you in studio here. All right, so let's see. I want to do one announcement. Chris, if I got you that image for the Dyer Conference today, the main church is announcing it tonight. We'll give them a quick trump card here. Discovering Truth in an Age of Opinions, May 3 and 4 at Village Church Dyer. That's in Dyer, Indiana. So if you live in Chicagoland, or maybe Western Michigan, Northwest Indiana, of course, we would love it if you would join us for Discovering Truth in an Age of Opinions. We've got 3 keynote speakers. Mike Lacona is coming to town. Cisco Cotto, who is a pastor of the Village Church Oak Park, which I believe was a church plant from Village Church Dyer. And Cisco is also a Chicago radio personality. And also Ted Wright will be giving one of the keynote or plenary sessions. We've got some great breakout sessions as well. Should be a fun evening and Saturday. Again, an apologetics conference, May 3 and 4. We would love it if you'd join us. You can go to defendersconference.com/Dyer, D-Y-E-R, defendersconference.com/Dyer to learn more and register. All right, well, let's see here, Seth. Again, I'm kind of going in this cold. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. So we've got these questions from you. If you're one of our listeners today and you want to ask a question, we have reopened the call lines. So if you want to give us a call, the number to call is 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. If I remember that. It has been a long time since I've had to say that number. Yes, 505-278-7483. And I'm monitoring the calls as they come in. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask or something you want us to talk about on the show, please give us a call. You can also text the word Veracity to 555-888. I will load up the texting platform as well. Seth, take it away.
All righty, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Well, I was so inspired from the Explore God series. I thought it was a wonderful series of podcasts. I learned a lot. But I just thought, you know what, why don't we take this to the streets, as it were, cold, see how Kurt would do.
Hopefully not as cold as a cold case,
And so what I have here today is what I think are probably 5 of the most common questions that a Christian would run into, and 5 common slogans that they might hear.
Okay.
Maybe in the context of sharing their faith, or if a friend knows that they're a believer, they might hit them with one of these. So we're going to see how, an in-the-flesh apologist would handle these without any before preparation.
I feel like I should have done more homework just to get ready for this.
But you always have to be ready to give an answer, Kurt.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe Reddit.
Maybe it was a Bible. I don't know.
Should be fun. We've already got people commenting here. It appears Kurt Jarris is watching with me. Yes, Cameron, glad you're watching the program today. So I guess for people who may not know, the way I keep tabs on the Facebook comments is through my phone. So am I bumping my stats by having one view? Okay, all right. I'm guilty. No, it's easier that way instead of having my main computer where I keep tabs on the comments. So I keep tabs on my phone. So John writes in, this should be interesting. Yes, and if you got a question, John, let me know. And call in, too. We've, in the first year of our program, we had this call-in line, and our program's grown quite a bit since then, and we're hoping, from time to time, open up the call lines and hear from some of you folks. You can leave a message, or you can call in live here. So would love to hear from you. All right, Seth, what is the first question that you've got?
Okay, so the first one is not a question, but it is a slogan, that is heard very often today. And it's this: so many people disagree on truth that relativism must be true.
Yeah, okay. So because there are so many people that disagree, we can't really know, or I've seen this taken a couple different ways. There's the nihilist approach, or there's the relativist approach. The nihilist approach basically says, because there are so many different opinions, well, we can't really know what the fact of the matter is. And then the relativist would say, maybe off of that nihilistic approach, that therefore just go and do whatever is good in your own eyes, which is a relativistic approach. All right, so how to handle this one? Boy, I'm already on the I'm on the limelight here. So I would say mere difference of opinion or disagreement has no weight on the grounding of a truth. So, here's a fun one, and I think one of our listeners might appreciate this. There's there's disagreement over the shape of the Earth. All right, there are very, very, very few people who think that the Earth is flat, but they are out there, and they use their global positioning systems to meet at different locations, when they have conferences and such. But note how just because there's disagreement, that doesn't mean we can't actually know the truth. So we can know that it's true that the Earth is a globe, or it's a sphere. So, I think that should be a good, clear example. Now, if we Seth, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what about this one? Like, my brother and I, we can't agree on what's the best flavor of ice cream. So doesn't that show that there's, no best flavor of ice cream, and therefore truth is all relative?
No.
Yeah. And this, you might even stretch the example further, or go deeper into the example and say, well, actually, you can probably discover why it is that one might like chocolate over vanilla because of how many taste buds and how your taste buds respond to certain stimuli. So you might even come up with a scientific explanation for why that is. But mere difference of opinion, sometimes we have preferences, and sometimes preferences are distinct from truth about reality. So someone might have a preference to drive on the left side of the road. That's not going to work out well for them here in America. They'll get in a car crash. So that in terms of an ethical claim, what someone ought to do, right? There are some people don't think that there are things that ground ethical truths, but there are, in fact, things that ground ethical truths. And so that's part of our truth dome, if you will, things that fall under the
You're
scope.
saying that the flavor of ice cream isn't quite in the same category as, say,
so
murder.
That would be a weak analogy. Yep. Ted, yeah, go
Can
ahead.
I take a stab at this? I would say with the flavor of the ice cream, it is objectively true, actually, that you like chocolate and your brother likes vanilla. That is objectively true, because truth is that which corresponds to its referent. Another example that people give is, isn't it all truth relative? Because in Chicago it's like 28 degrees, and in Atlanta it's like 68 degrees. So it's two different. Well, no. So it depends on the referent. So truth is that which corresponds to its reference. So the problem with people making the case for relative truth is that they have to use the law of non-contradiction to make the case for relative truth. It's objectively true that there is no such thing as truth. Well, is that true? Because if that's true, then that's false. So you can't get around absolute truth without using the law of non-contradiction.
Yeah, yep. We've got some other folks chiming in online here. Zach says, "Yo, what's up, Kurt? Good to see you, Zach. Glad that you're watching today. John, I see your question here, and it's one we could devote the whole program to. So I'm only going to answer it if, in fact, you call in to our call line. 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. John, you're a devoted fan. You should be calling into our call line and chat with us. Of course, it'd be good to hear your voice as well. So I met John when we did the Apologetics and Evangelism Conference in Connecticut. Ted, you remember that? That was last year. So it's great to have John.
Great to have John
as one of our regular viewers of our program. All right, so Seth, does that kind of cover a little bit? I mean, just because there is disagreement doesn't mean we can't actually know what the truth is. Some people are wrong, and that can go into areas of knowledge that we might not think that would have applied to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading last night in preparation, but even though you didn't prepare, I had to be prepared for this. But there's a postmodern writer named John Caputo, and he puts it like this: the truth is that there is no truth. And obviously that's immediately a contradiction.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty easily dismissed there. So are you ready for number 2?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this one is a question now. And it's this: if God created the universe, then what created God?
Ah, yes, yeah. God created the universe. Yeah, this is one of the classic, when people propose the Kalam cosmological argument, this is one of the classic misunderstandings. So the Kalam cosmological argument is that whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And they say, well, what created God? Well, wait, you missed that one important word, begin. Something begins to exist. In the Leibnizian cosmological argument, there's a distinction between things which are contingent and things which are necessary, right? And so God is a being who is a necessary being. He can't not exist, and he has always existed. This is, if you want to get more into the doctrine, this is divine aseity. This is, that God is not dependent upon anything for his existence. So that's sort of the quick answer to that question. So when someone asks that question, they're asking the wrong type of question. They're presenting what's called a categorical error. And so some might even say this is a contradiction in terms. So it might be asking like, hey, do you know my friend, the married bachelor? And you might say, well, wait, what, huh? What are you talking about? So people aren't realizing that when they talk about God, they're talking about a necessary being. And so that's where the contradiction, they're unaware that they're talking about a married bachelor. And so we need to just help explain, when you're using that term, as I understand, this is what you're referring to. Now, maybe they have in mind, which there's a big misconception out there, especially by atheists against Christianity. They think that when we talk about God, we're talking about something like Zeus or Thor, these sort of demigods, these very human-looking like super powerful humans. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about the creator of the universe. We don't have that in mind. Now, humans are created in the image of God, but that's not to say that God is, looks like us. And so
right.
That's a big difference there.
Yeah, I would say that God, it's a great question, Seth, and you hear this a lot, especially on the street, when you hear people, you're talking about apologetics questions, the question of who made God. The very definition of God is a spaceless, timeless, immaterial being. So that's not how we define God. If we're defining God as this old man up, in heaven with a gray beard that kind of looks like the picture of Leonardo da Vinci's, Sistine Chapel, or Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, then yeah, obviously. But we're not talking about that. And Kurt touched on this earlier when he talked about the Kalam argument, and that is, even science itself reveals very strongly Einstein's theory of relativity, that all space, time, and matter came into existence a finite time ago. So people argue about the age of the Earth, but what this shows, the physics shows, is that the universe is a contingent thing. So then the question is well, then what created the universe? There had to have been a spaceless, timeless, immaterial creator of the universe. And that's how we would define God. It's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial. And then you dig into it further, and you find out he's infinitely wise and infinitely holy, and there's personality there, moral.
Not just is he transcendent, but now he is also immanent.
Yes.
So he's among us. Seth, I hope that's a good answer. We have a caller who's calling in here. And now Call-In Studio has this new feature where they auto-screen, so Chris doesn't have to... Before, many people that don't know this, in the earlier days, Chris would be monitoring his phone, and if we had a call, he would walk out of the room, and he would screen the call, and he'd come back in, and so then he could type in the note there about who this is. So now Call-In Studio, the program we use, has an auto-screen feature. And so, John, I've brought you on the line here. How you doing, John? You there? Hello, John. He's calling about why God allows evil. Well, we'll keep this on here, and maybe he'll hear it. Maybe he's turning the volume down on his phone. I'm not sure.
So while we're waiting on John, do you think
Sure.
you're ready for number 3?
Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
Okay. It's wrong to judge others, and Jesus said so.
Oh, this is great. This is a softball. I thought these were going to be a bit, this one was, this is nice. All right. So it's wrong to judge others, and Jesus said so. All right. Well, you need to ask yourself, when you're thinking about how to respond to this, what does the person mean wrong? And what does it mean to judge? So if you say it's wrong to judge someone, are you saying it's ethical to judge someone? And when you're saying you judge someone, are you making a moral evaluation, or are you prejudging someone? There's a difference there. Jesus all the time makes moral evaluations. He tells people, don't do this and do this. All the time, moral evaluations, okay? And when the person who's saying this common saying, says that it's, how did you phrase it again, Seth?
That it's wrong to judge others,
wrong.
and Jesus.
Right, okay. Yeah, so when he uses that term wrong, that person is making a moral evaluation. So they're making a moral evaluation in saying you shouldn't make moral evaluations.
Exactly.
So so this is a contradiction. This is A and not A. And so frequently, sadly, is the case, people do not who propose this haven't read the Gospels thoroughly. They've maybe listened in church from time to time, but they are very unfamiliar with the teachings of Jesus. Extremely unfamiliar with them. The Christianity they know is just the pithy sayings. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do not judge. And in fact, if you go look at that passage, I think it's in Matthew, perhaps among other places. What does Jesus say? He says, it's not an instruction not to judge. It's actually an instruction on how to judge. Jesus says, first, who are you when when you accuse your brother of the speck in his own eye? First, take the log out of your own eye, then you can go do this. So Jesus is talking about hypocrisy there. That the speck and the log, same material, and so you've got to take that out first before you can be someone to come along someone and help them in some area. So Jesus is teaching you how to approach your brother and to help him in a moral situation. Whereas the relativist wants to use this as a license. He takes this out of context and uses it as a license for whatever behavior this person might be wanting to do. All right. That's that. I know John's call has dropped here. So, but he tried to call in. So I'll give you that, John. I pushed the talk button and we should have been able to hear you, but I didn't hear anything. Let us know in the comments if you were talking and that wasn't working, John. All right. So John wants to know. His question is, why does God allow evil? We did do an episode in the Explore God series on this just a few weeks ago, And there are different approaches to why God allows evil. Might depend upon what your view of divine sovereignty is, on human nature, the spiritual realm, divine providence. So a lot of factors play into how we might answer this question. So I'll just give a broad answer, and let me know what you think. So I think one of the main reasons why God allows evil is because he wants to be in a genuine relationship with his creation. If you were to create a Lego set, let's say they're motorized Legos. I mean, I had the train set going up in it. If you were to program it all, I'm relating to a machine, and it's not the same. Whereas if you have a creation that is an agent, you want that relationship to be genuine and real. So what does that require? I think that requires a certain level, and we can debate over what level and scope that is, but I think it requires a certain base level of human freedom. And so why God allows, we can say at least some evil, perhaps even most evil, certainly most evil, I think, is that human freedom is abused and misused. And so we use our freedom to hurt others, physically, emotionally, psychologically. So humans, we're not doing the things we ought to do. And so in a broad, simple answer, but which, I hope, Ted, I nuanced that enough.
Yes.
There's a base level of freedom in the world that God requires for a genuine relationship with him. He set that up. It's the model. It's the framework from which he has set this world up. And so that's why most of the evil in the world occurs.
That's very well said, Kurt. I would say another component to this question is the very definition of evil. So when a skeptic or someone who poses this question, they say, well, why does God allow evil? Well, how do you even know what evil is? Define what evil is, because if they're coming from an atheistic standpoint, or if they believe that atheism is true, there is no God, then really evil and good are just vague categories depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Because, in one society this may be good, and then we're talking about, we don't really have any standard to judge what is good and evil. So that figures into the discussion as well.
Yeah, if the atheist just means, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, Lottie freaking da. Some people do like it, you might say, in a discussion on that,
Exactly.
There is no grounding. There's nothing that connects the two ideas. I just don't like it on the atheist view. Okay, on the atheist view, there is no objective grounding, so all we have are our subjective opinions and evaluations. But why should one subjective one value more than the other? Seth, in the context of your other question, you got the chocolate and vanilla, right? And there's nothing that should woo one person over to the other. So that's one of the shortcomings with atheistic objections to the problem of evil. There still might be theistic objections or concerns. And in some of my academic work as well, I'm concerned with the view that evil is really just good, and it's just masquerading as evil. So that's a concern. That's one approach some people take to this, that God has a divine plan through all these evil actions, why they occur, in a meticulous sense.
And can I bring in a pastoral type of thing? So let me also make this distinction too. So, and Seth, you didn't really ask the question this way, but I would say that, we as apologists and philosophers and Christian thinkers, when you're talking about, you can answer the question from a philosophical or an apologetic standpoint, and that's important, but it's also not going to help someone who has actually experienced evil in their life, or something horrible that's happened to them, maybe a car accident or a relative or someone who is abused or something like that. Sometimes those philosophical answers, they're good and they're true, but they don't really help. But so I would say this, we can, and I think there are good arguments that Christians have. The problem of evil is not just a problem for the theistic worldview, it's also a problem for an atheistic worldview as well. But I'll say this lastly, and that is that in the Christian worldview, in the Christian view of reality, God came down to earth in the form of a man, in Jesus Christ, who experienced brutal evil on the cross, and who is able to empathize and in fact, there has provided a solution ultimately for evil, the problem of evil.
Yep. We've got Stephen who commented online. A number of great questions, Stephen. We can't get to all of them. Might be able to get to one or two of them a little bit later. I want to make sure, Seth, we go to your next comment or slogan or saying or question. What's up next here?
Okay, very good. So John took one of mine on evil, which is great. I think he knew that when we're throwing some softballs here, that evil would definitely be one that comes up. And,
sure.
That's, of course, a question.
It's the biggest objection that people bring against theistic belief. So
yeah, absolutely. So this next one I think is maybe a little bit more difficult to answer, and that's if you can't prove it scientifically, then you shouldn't believe it.
Okay. If you can't prove it scientifically, then you shouldn't believe it, or you can't really, take heart in it. So here's the way around this one. There are a couple different ways. First, you could say, well, look, there are these different fields of inquiry where we can learn about things. Say we can learn about art, and we can learn about history, and we can learn about mathematics. So we can learn, and logic, for instance. There are self-evidential truths. The law of non-contradiction is one of those. You don't perform a science experiment on that. So you have these other fields where you can learn truths about reality. And I think that the realm of religion is one of those realms where you can say, no, that's not true. For example, the Book of Mormon makes certain claims about a historical battlefield and an ancient people group, and those claims have been unverified. Now, there are some claims someone might say, well, in the Bible there are claims of people groups, right, Ted, about the Hittites. The Hittites previously had been unverified in history until more recently, actually. So, but there's a big difference here. One, in the Middle East, I mean, we know that's where people generally came from. Here in the Americas, where the Book of Mormon makes that claim, you can just start digging, and you're not going to find a thing. So the probability here that what the Book of Mormon is claiming is very, very, very unlikely. So it's a historical claim, right? So the religious claim isn't separate from history. So we can make evaluations on that.
Seth, I would answer it this way, and that's good, Kurt. You get some really good points.
Are you going to say that the scientism approach presupposes certain truths?
Yes, but also, I mean, it's that itself is not a scientific statement.
Yeah.
The fact that, don't believe something unless it's scientific. Well, should I believe that? Prove that question in a scientific. Where are you going to find that in a test tube? Where am I going to go to find that empirically verified? But there are a lot of things that we believe without quote unquote scientific. It depends on how you define scientific truth, and I think a lot of people today who are committed naturalist or materialist, they define science by the scientific method, and that's not necessarily science. In fact, philosophy is all over science. In fact, you can't do science without logic, without ethics, without other branches that in themselves are not actually scientific. The laws of logic are not scientific, and yet you can't prove them empirically. Yet we hold them. You can't be a rational person and not hold to the laws of logic, the laws of mathematics as well, moral laws, moral truths, the fact that there is an innate sense of right and wrong that people have. Where does that come from? C.S. Lewis talked about this. So these are not empirical things. But again, it sort of begs the question when people say, well, you shouldn't believe it unless it's scientific. Well, there's a lot of things that we hold to that, but again, they're coming from a particular worldview, a more naturalistic worldview. But there's a lot of things that are not scientific. Again, like I said, the laws of logic, mathematics, things like that.
Seth, let me take a moment here, and I know Stephen's got like 3 questions here, and I think he's still tuning in. So let me briefly address one of your first questions here, Stephen. Very good question. You say, in dealing with difficult questions, probably some of the most prevalent are questions concerning Old Testament difficulties. This is true. For example, you write, like, why did God have females marry their rapist? Why were people allowed to sell their daughters into slavery? Did God command genocide in the Old Testament? On that last question, let me encourage you to go watch the Defenders Conference from 2018, where we invited 4 different Christian perspectives to address this subject. It was really rather boring, right? They all talked about the same thing. No, it was actually very exciting having the different interpretations. I know the folks that attended loved the different perspectives on that. Chris has the image up. Yes, there it is. All right, we've got to take a short break here. When we come back, though, Stephen, I do want to answer that first question, though, about whether in the Old Testament, whether God required a rapist, a victim of rape, to marry the rapist. That's a very difficult one, a good question, and I'll answer it after this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Let's say there's this Christian apologist. You love their message, but have trouble finding their videos, their articles, or social media posts. How do you stay connected to them? We're on it. Defenders Media uses the tools of the digital age to create content for your favorite apologists. We give them more screen time, more digital soapboxes, and more presence to deliver more of the content that you love. That's what we do.
I know that social media is important to those of you who follow my work. Many respond to my videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter, but it becomes impossible after a while to keep up with it all and to continue with research. That's why I'm thrilled that we have found a solution, Defenders Media.
Whether it's a website, whether it's printed material, whether it's a question on graphics, I cannot do what I do and reach my audience without the help of Defenders Media. They have been integral in helping me to reach my audience.
Defenders Media ensures consistent content reaches your hand from today's leading apologists and apologetic ministries, like Mike Lycona, Apologetics 315, the Veracity Hill Podcast with Kurt Jarris, and more.
To learn more, text the word Defenders to 555-888, and we'll send you a free PDF of the top 5 ways to share the gospel online. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you'd like to learn how you can become a sponsor, go to our website, veracityhill.com. We've got an open call line. We've brought it back today. It's been a long time since we've used it. If you want to call in and leave a question, the number is 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. And we're going through some common sayings or questions, and I have no idea what they are. Seth's prepared them. But first, I left you on a cliffhanger. Stephen has asked some difficult questions here. And one of those is about, in the Old Testament, does it say that the victim of rape must marry the rapist? Now, there's an interesting article at the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. You don't always have to agree with them. This is where I've got this article here, which looks at this question. And the author of the article has cited a number of different Old Testament scholars who have questioned the translation of that term, of the terminology there. And the passage, for those that are interested, comes from Deuteronomy, I think. Yep, Deuteronomy 22. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her. So these two terms here, seizes and violation. So there's question over the proper translation here, especially the context. So this author argues, given from what other Old Testament scholars have argued, that this season is not actually rape, but it could be a type of sexual embrace of sorts, maybe like Potiphar's wife trying to hit on Joseph, that type of context. So there is question of translation that maybe we need to look at and consider here. One thing I do want to caution is that cultural context is key. It doesn't justify, but it really can help explain things. So if there's one thing I learned from the Defenders Conference last year, these different scholars had different approaches to the contexts. So, for example, you had Paul Copan, who basically said that this is ancient Near Eastern war rhetoric. And while Copan and Clay Jones were very similar to each other, they still had some differences on this. So, for example, Copan's approach wouldn't necessitate the idea that God instructed the Israelites to kill infants. Okay? But now Jones, his approach thinks this was the case. And so cultural context might lead you to different conclusions. Then you've got Kenton Sparks. He was another one of the representatives. He proposed that the cultural context was that God didn't actually command this because God's holy, loving, and just, and God wouldn't do that. And so this was merely the Israelites' perception. Sparks didn't sort of phrase it that way, but that, I think, is a fair summary of his view. So cultural context is key, and I think if we look into this, maybe there are more questions here than we realize, and that translators haven't properly brought forth into that. So hopefully that answers that. We've got a couple more comments. Jacob, you've got some questions here. We'll get around to that. Also a comment from Seth Baker. Seth writes, "That Seth guy is really handsome." Seth, what's your last name?
A totally different Seth. I don't know him, but
gotcha.
He's got some good taste, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay. You know, I see this guy, the one I'm talking to right now has a baby face. Maybe this other guy has facial hair. I can't tell. All right, Seth, let's keep moving along. Jacob, we'll get to your question here momentarily, but Seth, I want to make sure we cover another one of your sayings.
Okay, wonderful. And feel free, if there's a flood of comments and questions, let's opt for those. But these were just ones I came up with last night. This next one is, does evolution leave God out of a job?
Does evolution leave God? I've never heard anyone actually phrase it that way, but they phrase something like that. That we don't need God anymore. I've heard that one a number of times. So, unfortunately, it doesn't leave God out of a job. There's still a guiding process, even if evolution were true, subjunctive mood, were true. That doesn't mean God isn't the guiding process behind it. I think a number of folks, I could think of the theistic evolution camp and the intelligent design camp that would say that there are reasons for thinking there's a guiding process of sorts. Of course, there will be disagreement between those camps on the specifics of how it all worked out, the mechanics of it. But it wouldn't leave God out of a job. In fact, one thing I like to talk to people about is when God works providentially or miraculously, he does so in the natural world. And so we can explore and come to a belief about how something was brought about, but it doesn't explain why something was brought about. And so that's where you might have divine agency come in. So I don't think evolution would leave God out of a job. God did create the heavens and the earth. How he did it, there's debate over. But if it were true that Darwinian evolution, whatever that might mean, because there are still disagreements even in those camps, and some people are now even questioning the Darwinian model. Non-Christians, just on the sheer scientific basis, are questioning that framework. That doesn't say how God brought it about, so it wouldn't leave God out of a job.
Right. It sort of hints at this whole idea of the God of the gaps fallacy that a lot of naturalists and evolutionists will bring up. But there's also on the flip side of the coin, there's also a naturalism of the gaps fallacy. That if we can't understand it, then evolution will eventually find a way, or evolution did it. So it just sort of begs the question in the opposite direction as well. Yeah. But very well said. I think you're absolutely right that in the intelligent design camp, and not just the intelligent design guys, but there are an increasing number of scientists who are questioning the whole Darwinian model. And I believe Mike Behe's got a new book that's just, if it's not published now, it should be out really soon, on Darwin. Darwin Devolves, I think the name of the book is. And it's I had some friends a couple of years ago that came back from the Royal Academy in London, which is they are the heirs of Darwinian evolution, and these are the secular Darwinian biologists in Europe, and they're basically saying that Darwinianism is defunct as a theory. We've got to look at new areas. They were not saying it was evolution or that it was intelligent design, but they were saying that we realize that this is not predicting like we thought it was. So it's got some scientific issues with it.
Yep. All right. So Jacob has a question here that he's asked, and I might need some clarification if he's still tuning in. He asks, how would you respond to this? The terms everything and nothing have the same definition. That is, you can't take something out of it or can add something to it. Where is the contradiction in these two terms? So I think what you're proposing here is that someone says, well, you can't take something out of it or add something to it are qualifiers of the two terms everything and nothing. So hopefully I've understood your question here, Jacob, and thanks for watching, by the way. I would say this, that the contents of the terms, the quantity of the terms, are different, which means they are different conceptions. So nothing refers to what rocks dream of, as I believe Aristotle once wrote. Nothing is what rocks dream of. So if you want to think about that, that's nothing. All right, and then everything would be all of the items, all of the things that are in some set. Okay, so there you could see how you have different numbers. So if I have nothing in my hand, okay, there's no thing in my hand, in the palm of my hand that I'm holding. But if I have everything or all of the bottle caps within my reach in my hand, I now have two. See, look at how that worked. Two bottle caps. So that's everything or all of the bottle caps on my desk, at the very least within my reach. Maybe there are more. So that would be a difference of everything and nothing. And hopefully I understood that correctly, your question. So I'm not sure how that might be brought up in other apologetic contexts, but it's very good for critical thinking. I'm even teaching my young daughters how to make these qualifications. I think here in logic, the square of opposition, all SRP, some SRP, some S are not P, no SRP. If you can get those four qualifiers down, you're gonna learn how to think well pretty often. So all dogs have four legs. Well, what about those rare dogs that have only three legs? Well, even still, that's usually a deformity or something like that.
Yeah.
So you can think well if you can get those qualifiers down. So Jacob, if you're still watching, feel free to follow up here with that. Hopefully I understood your question. Seth, what else do you got?
Okay, here's another. All religions teach basically the same thing.
Yeah, and that's just wrong.
Not true.
This person has maybe not looked at religions or hasn't thought critically about them. What sets Christianity apart is a number of things. One, I like the golden rule. I like how the golden rule is set apart from other religions. And a lot of people don't know this. They think, oh, well, no, other religions teach the golden rule too. Don't do what you don't want done to you. That's different than do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You see, Jesus' command is proactive. It's not leave me alone. The silver rule, as it's commonly called, is the leave me alone rule and I'll leave you alone. So Jesus is actually saying to go and love people. That, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is distinct from all the other world religions. Also, Christianity makes a historical claim, one that is testable, and it's also falsifiable. So Christianity makes a historical claim here, and of course Islam does as well. The Book of Mormon, as I mentioned, does. So when religions make historical claims, those are testable, and we can come to conclusions about them, and we can see how they vary. Did Jesus come to America, as some believe, or did he not? That's, a testable claim. Okay, so do they all basically teach the same thing? No, they don't. In their history, in their ethics. How about theological anthropology? That's a big terminology. That's my area of doctoral work, theological anthropology. That is sort of theological study or discipline of the nature of man. What is man like? Are humans good people in their essence? Are they good generally speaking? Are they bad? What's the situation here? And different religions will have different approaches on how they address that question. So, for example, in Islam, they think that humans are a blank slate. This was John Locke's view, the political philosopher, that there's this blank slate. We're neither good nor bad, and it all just depends on our environment. Also, there was in Christian history, the Augustinian-Pelagian debate. Pelagius believed that the fall, that refers to the first sin, the fall didn't have a drastic effect on humanity, only sort of a social effect. So he sort of held to a blank slate view as well. So that's different than saying that when humans pop out of the womb, that what's their situation like? And I think the Christian view is that there's, at the very least, and by Christian view here, I mean that all of the camps within Orthodox Christianity would say that there is a propensity to sin, that humans now live in a fallen world, that we all die as a result of the fall. So there are consequences. Some Christians will go further than that, but I'm just saying this is what Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholics, Protestants would all agree upon. So there is a difference of opinion, I should say conviction, on what human nature is like. So do all religions basically teach the same thing? No, they don't. Christianity teaches, hey, humans are so messed up, we need a savior, and we can't earn our salvation. That's another aspect. Ordo salutis, the order of salvation. So when we require a savior, that's different from the goods outweighing the bads in our life and having Allah judge how we've done.
That's very well, I would perfectly put, Kurt. I would only add one little thing, and that is that, if I'm talking to a person like that, and they're saying, well, all religions teach the same thing, you did great, a perfect answer. I would also say this, that it does reveal that man is religious by nature, and that you're going to worship something. Even an atheist, there's some kind of religious loyalty somewhere. So it does show you that we are built for a relationship with God. And so obviously other religions are an attempt to do that. But, of course, they're very different in how they do it.
Mm. Yep. Good point. Keep them coming. This is kind of fun. Maybe we should do this more often.
Okay, are you ready for this one?
Sure.
All right. Why doesn't God make his existence more obvious to us?
Oh, this is a hard one. No softball here.
This is a fastball. Throwing this one in there.
Yes, good. So why doesn't God make his existence more known to us? In the academic debates, this is what's called the hiddenness of God. And this is becoming very popular among critical thinkers for an objection against theism. Now, let me first say this, and this is an interesting take, perhaps. Let's say it's true that, let's say the argument is a good one against the existence of God here, that if God were to exist, he would show himself more frequently, more obviously for his creation, to know that he exists. If we say that's a good argument, but we have all these other arguments in support of God's existence, then we need to weigh all of the arguments cumulatively in order to make an informed evaluation of the situation. And if we grant the hiddenness of God view here, let's do that. So you've got the one good argument. Let's say you got two, maybe even three arguments against God's existence. But let's say you've got 10 or 15 arguments, or a dozen or so, you might say, arguments for God's existence. You need to put those together, and maybe you weight some arguments together. I think that it's still overwhelmingly the fact that God exists, that we can know that. So, yes, let's say it's a good one that shouldn't push you away from God. All right, now let's address the argument more so. There might be reasons why God hasn't written, "I am here in the sky." He might have certain reasons for doing that, and we might not know what those reasons are. This is an approach to the evidential problem of evil called skeptical theism. And skeptical theism doesn't refer to that one is skeptical of theism, but just that maybe we don't have this information about why God would do something. And so maybe that would apply here with divine hiddenness, that a certain level of distance, epistemic distance, is required for God to relate and to allow certain freedom for us. Now, if God were to make his existence known more so, would that guarantee more people believe? No, I don't think so. I don't think it does. When you read the Old Testament, you see God performing these miracles with the Israelites time and time again. Think about the 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, the pillar of fire and by night and cloud by day. So God is clearly working with them in their immediate context. And guess what happens? They still build the golden calf. They still rebel. They don't follow along. And so what happens is Yahweh says, fine, you're going to have to wander the wilderness for 40 years, because what basically he's requires and wants to bring about is a fresh crop, new people. So he requires a generation to pass before the Israelites can go into the promised land. So even with these manifest experiences the Israelites had, they continued to rebel. So I want to sort of undercut the question or the argument here and say, would that really be enough to bring you to believe? And not just believe propositionally, but to give your allegiance, right? And what is giving your allegiance? That means you got to give your will over. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that. And they wouldn't, even if God wrote, "I am here in the sky, in the clouds." Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a quick, again, I was unprepared for this, so hopefully that's a tough question, Seth. I'm glad you brought that up. And it is becoming more common, so I've got to work on maybe preparing my answer to that one.
And there's been atheists that have been rather blunt, when asked the question, well, what if you died and, you found out that God existed? Would you worship him? And some atheists have been...
they say no, I still wouldn't. Yep.
Exactly. Like, I'd rather go to hell than go to heaven. And I think that's pretty revealing.
Which highlights the will. It's the will that Kurt was talking about in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. To give a simplistic answer, and Kurt gave the scholarly answer, which is correct, I think. Hebrews 11:6 says, "But without faith it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he exists, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." So for the atheist, and Kurt, you nailed it right on the head, that what they're looking for is this extraordinary evidence, as if there's not enough evidence already. Whereas Romans 1 says very clearly that since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen from the things that have been made, so that men are without excuse. So it really highlights the will and not just the intellect, because they're, it's like, well, I don't know if there's a God. Well, no, Paul says you can know there's a God, and then the science backs it up as well.
Yep. Yeah, and you said there the atheist is looking for the extraordinary evidence. Mm-hmm. And this comes from Carl Sagan, who said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The trouble is there's no such thing as extraordinary evidence. It all just is evidence. There's evidence for and evidence against.
That's right.
An extraordinary evidence might be like having a video camera from the 1st century AD, right, of some event. Let's say Jerusalem being burned down by the Romans. That requires extraordinary evidence. Well, why think that? Why think that, for starters, there were no such things as video cameras. So you have to evaluate the time period, the evidence given the time period. So you can't require something that was impossible, right? So that then speaks to the will, that you're seeking for something that is impossible. And also the extraordinary claims. Is it, what is an extraordinary claim? And looking at the presumption of the person. For some people, that might not be an extraordinary claim. So that idea, extraordinary claim and extraordinary evidence, I think we should be willing to say, well, what do you mean by that? That's a very important question. What do you mean? What does that word require from your framework? And you'll discover there, when you ask that, you'll discover, oh, well, here's where we disagree. And I question your use of that term, or meaning what you mean with that term. So, all right, we've got here Michaela is tuning in. She is the best follower I've got. Clay Jones has something interesting to say about this. I need to swipe over here so I can read the full comment. In that we are proving ourselves as followers of Christ because we can't see him face to face. He says this is why we will be able to rule over angels who know without that God exists, or something to that effect. So yeah, there is this sense with divine hiddenness, the hiddenness of God, that we are proving ourselves. So this is also a part of what's called theodicy, coming up with reasons for why this might be the case. And so that's part of it. This is maybe one area of soul-making theodicy, where God is working on having us build our character, our spiritual maturity. So there's some aspect of trust to it as well. If I am away from my wife and I need a ride, I have trust and she's told me she's going to come pick me up. I trust that she'll be there. Now, even that trust might be mistaken. Let's say she doesn't show up. Maybe she got into a car accident, right? Maybe there's some other factors here. But I still have that trust based on the evidence and the reliability and the character of the person. I trust that they'll be there. So, Michaela better pick me up from the train station. All right, Seth, you have a quick one? Do we have time for one more?
I do. I have a quick one, and I'm going to give this to Ted here because he just was on the show a couple weeks ago.
I'm done.
And answered this question, and that is, the Bible's been changed so many times throughout history that we can no longer trust it. So how would you respond to that?
That's great. That's a big assumption that the Bible's been changed so many times. So obviously, what do you mean by that? That's the Greg Koukl tactic. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Would you consider that? If you haven't read Tactics, you should read Greg Koukl's book, Tactics. It's a great book. Since we're talking about questions, and Seth, have you read that book, by the way?
I have, more than once. It's excellent.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, you get an A for today. But no, so the Bible hasn't been changed. That's the thing, is that the question we're asking is that we're kind of the assumption is that you can't really trust the Bible because it's been, it's so old and it's been through so many editions and things like that. Well, that may be a popular understanding of it, but that's not the scholarly understanding of it. So when you're reconstructing the text, that whole science is called textual criticism. And so this is based on years of collecting manuscripts and evidence. And there's an organization in Germany called I think it's called the Center for New Testament Textual Research. It's in Munster, Germany. An American organization that does the same thing is called the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts, that's directed by Daniel Wallace. And what these organizations do is they count the number of New Testament manuscripts. And currently there are, what is it, close to 30,000, 29,000 manuscripts. Most recently we have a manuscript that dates to the 2nd century. It's a Mark fragment. It was believed that the Mark fragment was probably 1st century, but it ended up it was 2nd century.
Oh, we had a whole episode on that.
Yeah, you had Dan on the show.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at with manuscripts is we're looking for early attestation. We want the manuscripts to be within the time frame of the eyewitnesses, and then we want multiple attestation. So when you look at the Bible and you compare that to other documents in the ancient world, the Bible is head and hands all way over any other ancient document with the number of manuscripts and with the early manuscripts. So with this science, we're able to reconstruct the original text in its original format and compare and contrast the different versions. And they're not really versions; they're really text of the same thing. Beyond that, the early church fathers, we were talking about this earlier. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this. The early church fathers like Irenaeus and Polycarp and things like that, they're writing in like the 2nd century. So they're writing and they're quoting the New Testament documents. So these documents are actually, they're that widespread, and you can actually reconstruct the entire New Testament hundreds of times over just from the quotations of the early church fathers. When you add to all that archaeology, then you have an incredibly reliable document in which we can be, with a fairly high degree of certainty. Now, when you're talking about archaeology and you're talking about manuscripts, we're not talking about like logic or any type of where you're going to have an absolute definite 100%, but it's a very high degree of probability within a reasonable doubt that the New Testament is very historically reliable, that it's giving us historical information. We talked about Tacitus the last time we were on, Kurt. We were talking about how accurate of an historian he was, and Tacitus records something like 14 or 15 historical facts about early Christians that dovetail perfectly with what the New Testament says. And you add to that Josephus and other writers. The person who says that the Bible can't be trusted because it's been copied down so many times just really doesn't understand history. They understand manuscripts. They don't understand archaeology.
Yeah, it's not the telephone game.
No, it's not.
Which, sadly, Bart Ehrman, I believe, has used that example. The copies of, and he's,
oh yeah.
And I think he said it's like the telephone game. He used that as an introduction,
wow.
and really, I'm 90% positive I've heard him say this, but
wow.
I will go back and confirm. And it's a shame if he does.
Yeah.
Because he knows better.
Yes, he does.
It's not like that.
He's studying under Bruce Metzger at Princeton.
Yeah.
I'll add the two final quotes here that kind of finish this up to answer a question. And one of them is I'm paraphrasing. This is Dr. Gary Habermas at Liberty University. He says, and Gary has said, and I've read him say this somewhere. He said that we have enough evidence right now to prove Christianity over and over again. And when we say prove, we don't mean, again, with 100%, but with a very high degree of probability. And then the other quote is from Dr. Daniel Wallace, and he says this, and I saw him several years ago. We were in Dallas looking at some actual manuscripts. He says, today we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to manuscript. Christians who believe in the New Testament, we have this incredible embarrassment of riches. So we live in an exciting time when it comes to the New Testament, the Old Testament, as far as historical reliability.
Yep. And I just quickly Googled, yes, in fact, Bart Ehrman has used the telephone game analogy. And in fact, scholars have replied to that as well. So, all right, good. We've confirmed that. We've got to end the show. Seth, thank you for your questions and the sayings. How many did we get through?
We got through 8 of them.
8.
So we've still got a couple more, but maybe we can save those for later.
Sounds good. Add them to the next time we do something like this. We should maybe do this once a quarter.
Sounds good.
Something like that. That'd be a lot of fun. All right, well, that does it for the program today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a few bucks a month. Would love for you to consider becoming one of our monthly supporters to keep us going and growing here on the program. Also grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. They are Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Fox Restoration. I want to thank our guests today. We've got Seth over on the line and Ted in studio. It's great to have you guys here on the program. Thank you so much. And a special thanks to our technical producer, Chris, for all the fine work that he does week in, week out, except for next week, I think. He's gone. So we might not have a live show. We might have something pre-recorded for you if you're still tuning in here for us. All right. And last but not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.